So now where would separation come in? Who would she be separated from?
I mean, she's seeing, you know, she's seeing her adversaries
Yeah.
as responsible
Yes.
for, you know, so that's an inherent enemy that she's
Yeah.
seeing. That's who she's separated from.
Okay.
And we can't help other people particularly see that. Because their disturbing emotions are manifest in that way. When someone's angry or hurt or, you know, greedy or whatever it is, when they're under that state, you know, when they're under the control of that state of mind, they're just like someone who's intoxicated. They are out of control. And so just like having a conversation with someone when they're drunk is not helpful, the same is true when someone's under the control of a disturbing emotion. Yes, Lama.
Thank you. You know, when you started this exchanging self and others, one of the teachings I particularly love. And when I was listening to what Marianne was talking about, before I understood how to practice this, you know, I would, let's say, in a situation and say, oh, I thought it was to help the other, when it was really none of my business and I didn't know anything. I mean, because to say it's not someone's fault or this, when it's not from your own mind, it's impossible. So the separation is there from the beginning. Listening.
Well, that's one of the things,
yeah.
is trying to recognize how we can be a witness to someone's suffering without, you know, because part of it is, I don't know about you guys, but it seems like every time I say something about, like, myself being unskilled at this or that, 75 people, if there's 75 people in the room, say, oh, no, you're not like that. Excuse me? You know, Rachel, that you have to boost me up in every moment, you know? We've gotten into a situation where we're constantly placating, you know? Well, I mean, it's just not helpful.
Oh, not helpful.
It's like we need Dharma friends to be able to say, yeah, I can see how you might say that. You know?
I like Dharma.
So part of it is, the reason I bring that up, is I think that part of it is that we are so uncomfortable with other people's discomfort that we want it to go away as soon as possible. We want to fix it right then and there. I don't want to sit and hear about your divorce for the 750th time. I want you to just move on. You know? So that's not the most skillful way to do it.
Not at all.
You know? So it's really about this stepping back and really thinking about what would be helpful here. Not to me, but to this suffering sentient being, you know? And if there's nothing you can do, then maybe you just end the conversation and move on, you know? If there's something you can do and you're able to do it, then perhaps you pause and you patiently, you know, kind of have a skillful conversation, okay? But when we don't see our commonality, when our response is there's a better way for them to do that, we're forgetting that they're suffering sentient beings and that we are in the same boat they are.
Yes, we are.
You know? And so we're kind of putting a false distance between us. I know what you need to do, you know, instead of just being with the suffering for a moment. And understanding that. This person's under the compulsion, totally inaccurate, you know, And you can wish them in your thoughts that this eases and that they're able
Like keep them
to
in our
take.
prayer, right?
You're talking while I'm talking. I know, that's how you learn.
Yeah. I'm trying to add to what you're talking.
Okay. I don't need that. Okay. So, where was I?
Oh,
Not knowing when you're trying to help someone, whether or not you're actually being able to do more good and not helping them for the sake of your own benefit so that you feel better, but actually paying attention to what might be needed at the time.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know where I was going.
Something like
Yes, I did say those things. So, I think this, but if we can get in touch with the suffering,
That's what you're saying. You're saying staying in suffering.
recognizing we share this, that we actually know really exactly how they feel. If we allow that to arise, even though the conditions for it might be different for us, but we know how it feels when someone feels like someone else is really messing up our life, messing up our chances for happiness for some stupid reason, whatever it is. We've all been there. And we know how frustrating it is when we don't have control. But we're learning how we never have control. So what we do have control over is our response. So this is trying to remember that we're in the same boat, that we're not better than they are, we're not worse than they are, that we're all just doing our best, and we're not very skilled at it, And we're fortunate enough to have some teachings so that whenever we have those perfect examples where we go, where, it just strengthens our faith of conviction that blaming others doesn't help, that, we can just use that for our faith of conviction, but not necessarily try to get someone else to see that, because it may not be a good condition for that to happen. But that also makes you more likely to recognize when those conditions are there, and that it might be a good time to chat about it, and you might be able to help in a different kind of way. But it's challenging. It's challenging to learn how to be a skillful friend and not feed into their stories and all that kind of thing. It's mostly we learn by learning how to talk to ourselves. Yes.
One question. If you or I or Gary or anybody felt that they really needed help from others, okay, for many, many years, I would just talk about everything else. And when I got up enough courage when somebody said, like, what's wrong? That's how they usually put it in, what's wrong? And I would start to answer the question. Most of the time I get back, well, you shouldn't feel like that.
Yeah.
Why don't you feel like that because that's what you keep telling yourself. You should only think of, and I don't, because I really believe that we're dependent on each other and really need each other for everything, from the outside, from emotions. I mean, I think to have love, you have to give love. I mean, there has to be other for
for comfort.
Yeah, and
that's what's
no, I
interesting.
don't mean other. I mean we need each other
Yes.
to exist. Not there has to be other separate, but like I sit here and always think, okay, well if you weren't here, I wouldn't be here. You would like that dependency of.
So what was your question?
And my question is then, wisely, this is trouble for me. you seek out somebody that could be of help and not, because that could
And
be
not
of help.
Okay.
And not ask, how are you doing? Or if I said, can I talk to you? They said, yeah, do you have some time? Yes, I do. And then if it's disturbing things, I have found.
I'm not hearing the question.
When I've told about myself, because there's many, many times I need help with a lot of things, and it's the emotional things. Sometimes I need from others,
Right.
okay? So,
Mama, I'm not
ask
hearing a
help.
question. What's
okay, the question is that, do you look for a certain person?
No, you just,
Okay.
you have to, you know, like, we have to accept, we may ask the wrong person 700 times, and then finally, 701st, our causes and conditions come together and we actually find someone helpful. We also have to accept we may not have created the cause and condition to get it in this life.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
What causes that? What is your theory about that? What would be the kinds of things we could do that make it very difficult to be heard and helped in those kinds of scenarios?
That was very good answer.
What do you suspect?
That you don't hear as well.
Well, at least in previous lives,
Don't see as well.
that
with me.
you didn't really give other people,
A
and
chance,
you know,
okay.
supportive, skillful help,
Oh, of course.
and probably were dismissive. You know, who knows?
Alright.
But I mean, it's you know, it's basically we receive what we've done, you know, and so you just have to relax, you know, and quit being disappointed in the other person as if you have nothing to do with it. This is the point. We created the cause to experience these things.
An effect, right?
Yes,
I
Peggy?
think that we also have to, if we're not getting the response or the answer or feel like
That's my
that
frustration too.
we're getting the attention or being heard, as people that are studying Buddhism or Buddhists, we have to understand that other person that we're having the relationship with may be giving us the wish for happiness and to cease our suffering
That's what
when they might not have anything to say that will be a benefit at the moment, but we're wishing, we're giving them the thought.
So the other person is doing their best.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to keep that in mind.
And
That,
that's hard for me because I tend to fix things,
yeah.
and that's just unrealistic.
Well, and
So
it can
I-
also be annoying.
Of course.
You know, it's sort of like, excuse me, I'm an adult. I just wanted to talk about this. I don't need you to go solve my problems for me, you know.
Exactly.
Hard thing.
Just thought I'd throw that out.
Sound like my daughter.
Yeah,
Your daughter.
yeah, that's, well, I mean, this is the
Your
thing,
daughter.
is that sometimes people just need to be heard, you know?
Okay.
But the point is that, I mean, to me, you know, when I look back at my life and I think, well, I did the best I could. Well, that's so not true.
No? Oh,
You
can
know,
do
there were
better.
many occasions I could have done better than I did.
Okay. More skill.
You
more
know?
skill, practice makes-
So it's semantics in a way.
Yeah.
You know, of course, they were, you know, I was under the control of disturbing emotions and self-interest and self-cherishing. So, you know,
Well, you did the best you could under the conditions that you.
that's
had.
right.
So it's,
So it's all, like I said, it's semantics. It's all sort of the same thing. It's like, you know, we might not be getting what we hoped for from someone else, but we are a participant in that, according to the teachings.
Oh,
We
good.
created the cause to get this help
Yeah.
this way. And if it's useful or not useful is actually up to us, because it's always an opportunity for us to practice,
Yes, it sure is for me. 'Cause I like it, practicing.
you know.
Good at it, that's why.
Okay.
Helpful, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so let's look a little bit about this technique of exchanging, equalizing and exchanging self. I'm really lazy. I really want a short title. Equalizing and exchanging self and other. Okay, so that first step is the same that we talk about all the time, about trying to develop equanimity. And being aware that our labels of self and other are just points of view.
Okay.
Recognize, like everybody said, we're interdependent, you know. Really
Interconnected.
understanding that there's no such thing as an independent self.
Oh.
You know. Not at all. And understanding that these different labels of like self and other are not quite the same as saying the difference between yellow and blue.
Because one calls the other just labels, right?
You know, that the difference between self and other really is about who's speaking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not about something like the different color between blue and yellow.
Mm-hmm.
It is literally the same label.
It is?
When you
Color.
say or think, Lori, getting loud, I,
I'm sorry.
you know, it's the same as everybody thinking I. You're referring to the same thing,
Okay.
you know. When you think other, you know, it's the same thing. It's, you know, and so really being not just sort of like, yeah, but really getting that this is just it's just like tall and short, near and far, that it changes depending on conditions. So what we want to try to do, if we want to become enlightened to actually help others, you know, like our most dear loved ones, repay the kindness of our loved ones, we really have to understand, you know, to at least consider the possibility that all beings have cared for us in these ways, and we have cared for them. We've just been changing places, depending on what's ripening. It's this wanting to get to that point of not seeing others' suffering as others' suffering, and just seeing it as suffering.
Yes, I do.
So that takes effort. You know, instead of putting people in categories, you know, of that's their suffering, that's my child's suffering. However we do it, that as soon as we do that, we're putting artificial divisions. Now, granted, you know, we can help the people we know, you know, much more regularly than we can help people we don't know. So it isn't about actually, you know, with our ordinary sentient being minds, being able to relieve everyone's suffering. We can't do that. And we can actually impact the level of suffering of the people around us. You know? So don't get those conflated. Or don't feel like you have the weight of the responsibility of, you know, because that can just lead to despair. But it's this sense of trying to understand that just like we're made up of parts, you know, it's a collection. So sometimes it's the knee that hurts, and sometimes it's the back that hurts, and sometimes it's the head that hurts, and sometimes it's, you know, whatever. You know, it's just all these different parts, you know. Well, sometimes it's you that hurts.
Yes, it is.
You know, that we can actually, we have the capacity to really be able to see everybody as us. That we want to relieve anybody's suffering just as much as we want to relieve our own, or those that we love. And it comes from, you know, recognizing all the divisions we put into place and trying to stop it. You know, using logic. You know, remembering cause and effect. And we already have the skill within our own body most of the time. You know, it's like really when the left hand needs help, the right hand just pitches in. And then the right hand doesn't expect a thank you from the left hand for helping out.
Hands can't talk.
Yeah.
Voices can't.
Even if
Arms.
sometimes we make a little motion as if
Oh,
that
you
were
talk
the
like
case.
gesture language, right? Like sign language. I know.
So we need to see ourselves as part of a collection of sentient beings. And in just the same way, you know, we help all the collection of our parts of our body, we can also help all the parts of this collection of sentient beings. Now, do people feel like I just leapt over a mountain or something, left a huge step out or something?
I'm not sure. That's what you think of. You're the guru, teacher.
I think it's fun to think of it in terms of like how our right hand helps our left hand or vice versa. You know, it doesn't, Technon loves, you know, demonstrate like hitting his thumb with the hammer
Oh,
and how,
that hurts.
you know, the hands aren't going, aren't you stupid? How could you do, no, they immediately provide comfort to the other
I
hand.
think so.
You know, it's us that are going, you know,
Oh, I said
stupid, stupid, stupid.
Okay. That's funny.
So we want to be able to do this with all the parts,
Yep.
you know, to
These
just
parts that
jump in,
work, which the eyes don't work on.
be helpful,
Yes, can do.
stay out of it when it won't help,
Okay.
you know. If there's something, sometimes I'm not very coordinated, and so
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm doing
I'm just not
something, you know, and I
coordinated for
really
eyes,
want to get
but
both, but
everything
you know,
else.
it makes it worse if you have both hands in there
Oh.
because like they both fit or something,
Oh, okay.
you know. And I have to just trust one hand to be able to do it.
Oh.
But it gets harder and harder with each passing
Oh,
year.
yeah, it's all in a
So-
practice.
But the point is that it's recognizing that we're part of a collection.
Mhm.
We're interdependent.
And
We
you're
are
a
so interdependent. So what are ways that we remind ourselves of that?
We need help.
The food that we eat,
Collections
the
need
food
help.
that we are, places where we live, we will provide it for the most part for somebody else.
Yeah, and so, you know, one of the things that we can take into account is our body is half our mother and half our father.
Yeah, I realize that.
It doesn't belong to us at all.
Brother too, 'cause they will too.
You know? It's interesting when you start thinking about it that way. And that even your body is made up of lots of living beings.
Those Indian beings.
No. So this idea that, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help other people isn't based on any logic, because we're helping all kinds of beings all the time
Okay.
without, with total indifference.
Yeah, that's.
So we can even be helpful with indifference. That's how interdependent we are. Our actions affect other beings all the time.
I realize that.
So the ways in which we resist you know? Well, I'm not gonna help that person because they're so needy and they're just gonna ask me for more and more and more and more and more.
To demand.
We need to look at how we're separating each other.
Mhm.
Now, it's not that that can't necessarily be true, we just have to look at,
A different way, right?
it is my responsibility to set limits on my behavior,
Okay.
not someone else's.
Mm.
If I overextend myself, it's not their fault,
No.
it's my fault.
Oh, it is?
You know, I'm not setting my boundaries,
No.
you know. So sometimes we might resist by saying, it has nothing to do with me. And then you think about, you know how we talk about, you know, look for the helpers?
Mhm.
You think about one day, this person that you help might be the person present in some catastrophe that suddenly helps you.
Oh, interesting.
I was reading an article today about a kid who did a fundraiser to buy solar powered something, I can't remember what it was,
So panels on my roof would be.
and delivers them to people in Puerto Rico. You know, when he realized that people outside the cities were having such trouble, because he lived in a city, you know, he's 14. And so he started an online fundraising thingy and now is, you know, bringing these to the kids, you know, into these families. So it's, you know, now that happens because the karmic connection between that kid and all the people that he's helping from past lives. So he doesn't know them at all now. But the causes and conditions have come together for him to repay the kindness that they showed to him in some past
I
life.
could use that on my house.
So in that sense, all our positive actions are rewarded. And we're that interdependent. Whenever we're in a crisis, I mean a big crisis, it's usually strangers that help us. Whether they're medical professionals or, you know, the cab driver, the Uber drivers, you know. It's really understanding that, you know, or even just, you know, like if after a hurricane, you know, I mean, like, I don't know, y'all have had hurricanes here, I mean, you've had hits here, you know, in North Carolina, you know, Raleigh got really badly hit one year, Charlotte got really hit one year, the Outer Banks always get hit, you know. And so then all of a sudden you really have to, everybody's skills kind of have to come together so that people can move all those big trees and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
And stay
You
safe.
know, and so you're not reliant on just your family and friends. It's suddenly whoever's there.
Okay.
You know. So this sense of separation we have on just an ordinary day is missing the big picture entirely. You know, so it's helpful to think about these big disasters that happen and how all those relationships of friends, enemies, strangers shift. Suddenly a whole bunch of strangers become friends. A whole bunch of friends are not around in that moment. They live somewhere else. They weren't there, whatever, so they're not available to help.
Yeah.
So they're sort of like the strangers suddenly. You know, you don't recognize your adversaries because everybody's just helping. So it's just recognizing that when we put these false divisions in, we're basically increasing that sense of an independent self and an independent other. And that's not helpful if we want to increase our compassion, create the cause to be helped by others.
Yes. And good.
What other things do we think that keep us separate? I'm sure none of y'all think of it. How about, if I help them, how am I gonna take care of my needs?
They
That
help
kind
you.
of, sort of almost like there's not enough to go around, so
I realize that.
I have to guard my time, my money, my resources, whatever it is. So when those kinds of thoughts arise, we just want to look at what's really going on here. Because none of that probably is relevant. You know, and then we just have to really look what's going on here. What's coming up in my mind? You know, is it just laziness? I don't feel like helping today.
So.
I have really wonderful plans. And this is
I
going to
wouldn't
get
call
in the
it
way.
laziness.
Wouldn't that
You
be
know.
self-cherishing and egoism?
Yeah, so you want to look for that. Is that in there? Is there some ego thing going on here that really is just feeding the self-cherishing, you know? And then it isn't about changing your decision. It's about really being informed of how you came to that decision. So you can still choose, you know, I'm sorry I can't help you now because I have this other commitment, you know, and I'm going to fulfill it. So it isn't about that, it's about knowing why. It's about recognizing, you know, so that you can make an informed decision. So we're not just feeding our self-cherishing or feeding our selfishness, you know, whatever.
Or
You
just
know.
go.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Still not
Just notice I
working.
didn't use
Cause it's not working.
it. Is it cold?
I'm
It goes
comfortable.
back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's just when that fan's on.
Yeah.
It also has a lot to do with where we're
I'm
sitting.
hot, so, you know, I'm no help at all.
If you're near a vent, it might be cold, but it feels okay.
While you were talking, I was,
Thinking about something else?
no,
I
actually,
just couldn't resist. It was just,
Oh, you
vulnerable.
I'm blaming you.
Yes, okay, that's okay, I'm used to it.
No, I
used to it
So-
too.
So what's up?
No, I was really thinking of what you were talking about and helping others, and it reminded me of, you know, I'm sure we all have patterns from when I can't say, I'm sure I have patterns from when I grew up.
Right.
Okay?
Too.
And one of the patterns was, and it could be looked at good in a way, except that it
Just
wasn't
get to it.
always had to be.
Like go the
It
wrong
was
way.
that if somebody loved you,
Yeah.
or did something nice, you owed them.
Well, this is sort of like remembering the kindness and repaying the kindness.
However, it was with material things, and it was taught by
Mhm.
my
Yeah, whatever.
not mostly from my father, but this is how things were done. And if you didn't have anything, you were supposed to either not ask for help, figure out a way to
If
do
you
it
weren't able to
yourself.
reciprocate,
Yeah, if
then you
couldn't-
didn't
if
have the right to
somebody helped
ask.
you and you didn't have monetary means or to buy them a present.
Okay,
or
so
like-
what's the question?
So when I first heard your teachings of the Dalai Lama, and they said the most genuine gift you can offer a teacher is your practice.
Guru is what the
I
teacher
kind of
called
like went, oh, it was such a relief to me.
it. Me too.
However, to put that in practice, and I find it still hard because I was so ingrained from for 20 years from my family.
Well, most of
They're
us
still
are,
like
but
that.
the reason you were born in that family is because you had the habit before you got there.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah,
just,
but-
but I'm talking about now, I remember and I know
Mm-hmm.
that this is a habit.
Right.
Now, I mean, I understand karma before, but I can't remember that. So to go the other way and try to feel love and help and
And
acceptance
compassion.
from others without being able to materially
Yeah, yeah.
give back is
So-
harder for me than helping somebody.
Yeah, so you need to work on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I
And
mean,
it's-
you know, this is the problem. We are all in that same boat. We all have our habits that obscure the mind from wisdom. So we become illogical. We go to the wrong conclusions. We do all sorts of, you know, rationalizations that if we have some distance, or if a friend was talking about it, we'd be able to spot it, you know, like that. You know, so it's just a matter of recognizing, is it true? You know, and asking ourselves when these kinds of habits come up. If we continuously overextend ourselves because of some habit, you know, then we just, you know, we need to be, you know, you have to have, you know, you take the event and then after the fact you go back and you reflect on it. This all comes from having made the decision that you want to work on changing this habit. It doesn't happen magically because just all of a sudden because you want to change this habit, you will,
I just want to end this suffering of myself.
you know, so you have to work at that. So you have to remember that this is a habit, and then when you catch yourself doing the same old, and it's not skillful, and it's not useful, and it's not gonna lead to happiness, you know, then you have to go, okay, you know, how can I learn from this event, this repeated
And
event?
what I realized when we were talking about this topic of bodhicitta, you know, after many years of meditating, I realized how, like, even though I was the opposite, it was still about me.
Yes.
It was still about me.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
always about,
somehow,
this is the safe
you
thing.
know?
Whenever you think about yourself or your friends and why do they keep doing that, self-cherishing and disturbing emotions. So really, you don't have to go further than that.
No,
You know-
away from bodhicitta.
Well, I mean, that's just what it is. You know, we're still not taking responsibility
From abiding by.
for our experiences and how we respond to them. Well, we're all sort of in that boat. So it's a process, but it's a process of contemplating in this way. You know, so you have something that happens, you know, today, and you think, why did they do this? Or, I don't know what to do with this, or whatever. You sit there and you think it out. This person's not any different than I am in wanting to be happy and wanting to
We get
reduce their
suffering.
suffering.
Why we feel
Okay? So we can know that whatever their actions are, there's something being motivated by that. Okay? Then we think, and I created the cause to experience this. So what's that about? You know, and just, you know, really not feed the storyline
or the ego or
that's
the bad
based
habit.
on past habits
Yes.
and try to look at just the
Change.
facts. You know,
Like good change.
you know, from the Buddha's perspective. See if you can, you know, like, is it possible you created the cause for this? You know, have you ever treated anybody in a similar fashion? Have you ever, you know, really screwed up and thought entirely, you know, that it's this other person's fault, blah, 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 you know? Have you told yourself the same story you're hearing from them? You know, all those kinds of things, so that we can reduce this sense that somehow we're not in the same boat. And remembering, we all have Buddha nature. So this isn't about being bad people or, you know, stupid people or any of that. It's about habits of mind. And that our habits of mind, when they are incorrect, obscure us from wisdom. So when we're out of control, so it's really useful to recognize when we're out of control because of a disturbing emotion and not act from that place. Have patience and wait for that moment to pass. Accept the fact that you're suffering, you know, and don't punish yourself because of it. Don't do anything. And then reflect back when that moment has calmed down.
Oh, yeah, don't pass.
Because you don't want to get angry, or you don't want to be greedy, or you don't want to whatever.
Don't want to suffer, don't want to be tortured, things like that.
So I will send you the meditation.
Audio for me, because I don't see.
I don't have audio for you.
Well, when can you get it?
I
I can learn.
I can help you with that at a different time.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. They're not helping at all.
So the steps are, you know, the basis is equanimity. Then remembering all the kindnesses we've received. And how they're, you know, this interdependence. So that, you know, there are vast, you know, like scores of strangers who provide it for us, you know, and how kind that is. And then you look at the way in which we hold self and others to be different. But that, in fact, they're not. How we do things is different. What we think is happiness is different. All those kinds of things might be different, but those are just labels. Then we have to start thinking about the shortcomings of the self-cherishing thought. And that can be a bit challenging. Trying to discern the difference between self-care and self-cherishing. And the ego, really being able to spot where is my ego in this, is helpful, you know, to really just kind of look, you know. Because it's not that we don't want to cherish ourselves. Actually, we should cherish ourselves.
How?
You know? We have Buddha nature.
Oh, okay.
It's this self-centeredness that's not helpful. It's when our ego gets involved that somehow puts ourselves above others, not equal to others. And that we all want to be happy. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we all were happy? And then you need to think about the advantages of cherishing others. So it's really helpful if you make a list with your own words, your own examples from your own experiences of where self-centeredness has gotten you into trouble, has proved to be unskillful, has proved not to lead you to happiness. Even when it's, you know, it's, you know, don't leave out things like self-respect. Sometimes our self-centeredness really undercuts our self-respect. Because we've done things in our lives that we, you know, we'd be embarrassed to admit that, ooh, I was selfish again. No, but we have to remember that actually it had a consequence that was suffering. You know, that we're not proud of that fact.
Yeah, I know, I'm not.
So, just so that, you know, this is what we want to really get a grasp of why self-centeredness actually doesn't work in the long run. And then you want to make a list from experience of what are the advantages when we cherish others. And some of these things can be just speculative, you know, like I imagine that if I have an attitude of just cherishing others and I'm not preoccupied with myself, my own problems, that I won't suffer as much. You know, like it could be a theory because you haven't actually experienced it yet. You know. So some of it's just your logic, you know, just looking at the logic. Because we're trying to develop new habits of mind that counter our old habits. So we need a lot of reasoning going on.
Yeah.
So that we, in the face of our habit energy, we can go, no, I'm not going there. And I know why I'm not going there. So, and so with practice, of course, just like now, when we go, I knew it was the right thing to do, you know, we'll have that, it will be in us. We will have internalized it. We're not going to have to think of the whole list. You know? So it's, you know, don't worry about, you know, like, it'll take me the rest of my life to, you know, just to get through one day of trying to remember all these things. So this, and we'll do this next time, this meditation. But so this week, what I recommend is that you do a part of it. You know, like you look at the, you know, do it in stages. But you may have to put two parts together. Like the middle of it is a Tonglen practice, which is this taking and giving of suffering. And this one is from yourself. So they always say start with yourself. So this is about trying to remove, you know, taking on your future suffering. You know, and sending out happiness to your future self. So those parts need to, you know, I think it's parts 5, A and B. Yes, and C.
And see,
But anyway, but no, you just practice this, you know, so bit by bit. So you get, you know, so that any questions you have, you think about those, write them down, challenges you have to the logic, whatever, you know, to really, because it's, once you've developed this kind of package of logic and stuff in your own mind from your own experience, you know, you don't have to think about it anymore. You can just go there. You know. But it's effortful because you have to think about going there. But it's, you know, Buddhists don't have to think about it, but we do. But so you know, so if you do break it down in parts and get skilled at it and really remember it, you'll find that they fit together, and then it's not like, I'm sorry, between, you know, someone else talking to us and us responding, we have to take 20 minutes.
okay.
So. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts? Don't you wish there were more hours in the day so we get more sleep?
I wish there were less hours to sleep and more hours to practice.
Good attitude, Laura.
Yeah, because
Most of us are not there
because my
yet.
suffering gets worse when I'm home. When I'm practicing, it ceases, you know? Yeah, it's better for me.
Okay, so yes, Mom.
Exchanging self and other is different though than Tonglen, correct?
It's part of it.
Tonglen is part of it, yeah.
Equalizing and exchanging self. It's the exchanging self and other part.
That comes after.
No, it's part, the Tonglen is that, you know, I mean,
Isn't it a different visual? I mean, that's how I was taught, like Tonglen is.
you can do it all by itself, but it's also part of this practice of generating bodhicitta.
Oh, yeah, bodhicitta. I like bodhicitta.
So let's just, oh gosh, I've gone over. I'm sorry.
What happened?
Too much time.
I'm over time.
I like more time.
Sorry about that. But still, in spite of that, let's take a moment, and remember your positive motivation and intention at the beginning. And pat yourself on the back for your positive effort to participate in this class, to think about stuff. And according to the teachings, all this effort we're making in trying to transform our minds, or even consider thinking about these things in order to be of more benefit to ourselves and others, is a very positive action. And it will lead to positive results.
An end of suffering, an increase of happiness, right?
So we can rejoice about that. And then we want to make the wish that these positive results ripen on other suffering sentient beings
Not just ourselves.
until there are no suffering sentient beings left in samsara.
My eyes open away from me. And my suffering from my eyes will be great.
Okay. Now, let's just recite the long life prayers for His Holiness and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 244.
244.
In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Okay. Did you want to get the readings for this class?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll add you to the email and try to send the old ones to you. Okay.
Audio would be good.
All
for
right.
me.
Thank you.
Audio